unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, the production of Souls and Liberty. 77 days to go, and despite the efforts to put on a joyful face, things are not what they are being portrayed as in Chicago at the DNC. On the show today to talk about all of this is Trey Traynor of the Federal Election Commission, although speaking in his private capacity as just an American, and Jim Ellis, our political guru from Ellis Insights. And I'm your host, Gary Michael Voris, coming to you from Houston. Trey, let's start with you. Your thoughts on the first day of the circus yesterday in Chicago?
Well, yesterday was very interesting in that, first of all, everything was delayed, and that's a function of the modern Democratic Party. The Democratic Party consists of just a coalition of various splinter groups. And when you have that type of situation going on, you have, you have to check the box for every group that has to participate in their convention as it's happening right now. And that causes all the delays that they have. So you have somebody like the office of the President of the United States, regardless of who holds it, deserves the respect of everyone in the country. And here, based upon what's going on because of the coalitions that they have to kowtow to, you have the President of the United States going on well after primetime TV, well after most people have gone to bed. And you have a lot of people who didn't even get to see the President of the United States speak. Yeah,
let me ask you, Jim, bring you in on this. I mean, I suppose from the Democrats' standpoint, considering that the president, Trey's point is well taken, but considering that the man in the office, the President of the United States, is bumbling and senile and everything else, that's probably not such a bad thing from the Democrats' point of view that, they bumped him off of prime time.
Well, Gary, I'm not sure it wasn't planned that way. For that very reason. Obviously, this was just one more part of the Biden cover-up. Once again, we've seen them, and I don't think we can downplay or minimize exactly what they did. This was a coup, what they did to remove Biden and to place Kamala Harris in that position because they thought they were going to lose. And that's why they did it. This is the elite of the left wing saying, wait a minute, I don't care if he got 14 million votes or 5. We're moving him out of there because he's going to lose. And therefore, we're changing it, sort of like what they do in Russia, isn't it? Isn't that how Vladimir Putin is elected? It's just a slate. The elite of their party tells the people who they're going to vote for, and you shut up and vote for them. And that's what the Democrats have done. And I don't think we can minimize that. And I think the fact that Biden went on so late last night was probably part of that plan to cover up just how bad off he is.
Yeah, he really did. He stumbled over, as you would expect, even reading from a prompter, he stumbled, mixed up the word electrical with electoral in reference to the Electoral College. Trey, let's swing back to you. To Jim's point, and again, not asking you in your capacity as a member of the Federal Election Commission, but as a private citizen, solid Catholic, all of that, what they did to Biden was simply unjust, not to mention what they pulled on 14 million voters, as Biden himself pointed out.
No, Jim's absolutely right. This has all the makings of a coup. And, when you look back through history, all coups are predicated on doing some good for the people. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, it was because they wanted to save the republic. Right. So it's always predicated on some good that will come out of it. And here they're predicating it on passing the torch to a younger generation and handing it off to the first woman president, or, all of the various things that they've attached to it. But it does have all the makings of a coup. And frankly, the dishonor that was shown towards the office of the President of the United States last night by having him come on so late really is just really the final straw in that coup of not only can we control who the candidate is, but we can actually disrespect the office of the president so much that we can put him on so late.
Yeah, it's just uneasy. It gives you the creeps, because if they can do that to their own party's president and the president, of the United States and his office. I mean, look what they did to a former president. They're doing it to this one. Jim, let me switch over to you if I can real quickly. The passing of the torch, so to speak, which seems to be what was on stage last night. Biden saying, goodbye, and the kind of phony chant about, we love you, Joe, we love you, Joe.
Yeah.
We love you, but not really. And Hillary, I mean, clearly
we love you,
the
but
sun
get
has
out
set
of here,
on
right?
her stuff. She's just, it looks like an old washed up hag at this point. Never having gotten to the great pinnacle of power she wanted. So the old guard is there pushing themselves off the stage to make room for joyful Kamala. Are they really passing the torch, though? They are passing the torch to a different person, maybe, but what they're passing is exactly the same, in some cases worse.
Oh, no question about it. And again, it's really the elite of the left wing that's in control of all this. Why did Biden finally agree to get out? And remember, it was his decision at the end. They had no legal basis for removing him other than him saying, I will not run. And what really pushed him over the top? It was the big money people coming in there and saying, we are withholding our millions and millions of dollars of contributions unless you get out. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, that's finally what convinced him to leave. And because, again, they were panicked that they were going to lose. And it was interesting, too, because if you looked at the data at that time on the polling really wasn't that bad for him. I mean, they made that debate debacle way worse than it was. And that was obviously the underpinnings of the coup, right? Because they, being the Democratic office holders, kept that issue alive way beyond its life. And if you compare it with the data, it really, Biden was only a couple of points behind in most of these places. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like there was a cratering of support around the country for him. But I think they were doing this based upon what they believed would happen when we get to this point and into the campaign. And they very well may have been right about that. Yeah. And they are scared to death of another Donald Trump presidency because the bureaucracy, the left-wing elite, I think is scared and always has been of Donald Trump because he's a different Republican and they think he can follow through and do some of the things he's talking about with breaking up what they call the deep state.
Yeah, Trey, I want to talk to you about this also. Again, if you venture into an area that, if my question rather leads you to an area you don't feel comfortable talking about because of your position on federal election, Christian, just put up your hand and say so.
Sure.
But this business of them going up on stage last night, I mean, Jill Biden was on stage saying, Joe searched his soul and came up with the answer that he needed. No, he actually had a threat from Obama that they're going to 25th Amendment you, buddy, and Kamala's ready to do it. And it would ended up the same way anyway. So the famous say we can do this the hard way or we can do this the easy way thing came into play. But also all of this speeches last night on the stage, like, Donald Trump will weaponize the Justice Department against his political enemies. He'll put his political enemies in jail. I mean, the irony of all of it, they have a giant wall essentially around the convention. You can't get in without an ID and a photo ID. You get checked 3 times. I mean, the irony of all of this, is any of this being lost, do you think, or some of this being lost on a large part of the electorate? I mean, the irony is just off the charts.
Oh, I think the irony itself is being lost on a lot of people, and part of that stems from the fact that the mainstream media just won't cover these type of activities with regard to the wall, with regard to the ID checks, and all of the duplicity that's present in the Democratic National Convention is just not going to get the coverage. For me, what was most interesting last night in the quote passing of the torch is, the message is the same. I mean, they really are passing the torch because the torch is the message. Yeah. And if you look at Hillary Clinton's speech, she actually said the quiet part out loud at one point in her speech last night when she said, we want to have a national right to an abortion. That's a dramatic shift for the Democrat Party in this country to say that they want to nationalize as a matter of law as a matter of statute, a right to an abortion. And she said it out loud, and thousands of people cheered that. Yep. And here you have them, putting up a mobile abortion clinic and free vasectomies being given outside. I mean, all of these things are being done at this convention. And I'll tell you the most heinous thing that I heard last night, and it actually did come from the President of the United States, when he talked about the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters outside of the hall. He said that those protesters actually have a point. He said that on the same day, at roughly the same time, that the Israeli Defense Forces were pulling the dead bodies of hostages out of rubble in Gaza. And he said that those protesters outside who are chanting from the river to the sea, who are saying that the United States is giving too much aid to Israel to fight terrorist organizations like Hamas, he said that they have a point. Again, at the exact same time, halfway around the world, that dead bodies are being pulled out of the rubble. It was just, for me, it was just flabbergasting.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Well, Trey, if I can hop in here for a second, too. This is where I think they've got some problems with the duplicity in what they're trying to do. Now, let's overlay what Biden just said about your point on Palestine, and then look at some of the things that Kamala Harris is changing her position on. And one of those things is Israel. And she came out right after she got the nomination and talked about how she was going to be a strong backer of Israel. This is a change from her lifelong position, as are so many other issues like fracking and single-payer health care and defunding the police and being the czar of the southern border and Joe Biden's health. I mean, it just goes on and on. But this is where I think they catch themselves, that because they've got so many duplicitous statements out there. Biden now talking about, lauding really these protesters. And my favorite comment about not particularly them, but the ones on Columbia University and the university protesters, is you could have gone up to them and saying, what river and what sea? And most of them wouldn't have known. Yeah. And that's the case, I'm sure, with the crowd there. By the way, is far less than they expected. They expected tens of thousands of people. And even the media is talking about maybe they had 3,000. So it's way less than what was anticipated. But I think this underscores where they are in terms of trying to keep all these balls in the air. Like you mentioned, they're like all these coalitions they've got and what they're saying to each. And you got to keep all these stories straight. And sometimes they conflict. And I think we saw that last night. And I think that's a problem for them. And Trump needs to exploit that.
Well, Gary, thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Trey. I was going to ask you guys about the message here, and feel free to incorporate it into what you're both going to say. About the conservatives, patriots, whatever you want to call us, would have no way to get this message out if Elon had not bought then Twitter, now X.
Well, I fully agree with that and appreciate the great work that Musk has done to help defend the First Amendment in the country. But to Jim's point earlier of keeping all of these balls in the air, it really comes full circle to what we started with here today, in that the reason they got behind, the reason that they can't keep on schedule is because when you have to have a pro-fracking and an anti-fracking person on, and you can't put them on one right after the other because the messages conflict, so you have to put them on at different times, and then you have to put I'm okay with abortion in the States, but then I want a nationalized abortion. You have to put all of those people on the stage. It is the reason that Vice President Harris has not done a full-blown press interview since she has become the nominee for the Democratic Party, is because she cannot keep all of these things straight. I think about it in terms of, my children. I mean, you catch them with their hand in the cookie jar, and they say they don't want to do it, but they've got their hand in the cookie jar, and they realize, I can't lie anymore. I've gotten caught. Well, Kamala Harris is not going to realize that she can't lie until she's in a position of getting caught. But they're avoiding putting her in a position of getting caught by not putting her in front of legitimate media outlets who are going to ask tough questions about what her policy positions either are currently, or what they were, or what they've transitioned to, or what they may transition to in the future. She can't withstand that level of scrutiny from any type of media source. And in order to keep this lie going, they've got to keep her in a bunker much like they did in 2020 with President Biden.
At least they had kind of a BS excuse in 2020. Oh, COVID, it was COVID. I mean, it was a BS excuse, but for feeble-minded people, at least seem to have a semblance of a reason to do it. There's no reason to do it now. Jim, your thoughts on this whole, hide her away? You can't hide her away on a debate stage with Trump. So what should be his attack plan when he's on that stage with her?
I think that's a great question. And that's really going to be his only chance to get a message out. And apparently now, I guess they've agreed to 2 debates. That story seems to change daily as to how many there's going to be.
First there's 3, then there's 1, then there's none, then there's 1, now there's 2, now there's 1. What is it?
I don't know. Trump needs as many as he can get. It's the only way he can get his message out, really. I mean, yes, you got, of course, Fox News, Newsmax, but they basically preach to the choir.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to communicate with these key swing voters in these states, and he's going to need that. And these debates may be his only avenue, other than his own paid advertising.
Right.
But it's we need to see her on stage trying to defend all of these positions and the change in positions. And of course, she's got a compliant media, so they help her do that. I mean, it's not like they're pushing to have her on. They're going along with whatever orders they receive from the Harris campaign. And so this is a major problem that Trump has to overcome. And, it's not a fair playing field in this campaign, certainly. And I don't think we've ever seen the bias greater than we see it today from these outside sources. So
thank you for saying that, Jim. I was just going to say that very thing. I mean, the media has always been biased. I've been in it since 1984, covering all the races, and there was always this tinge of, can't let the conservative guy win. But now, I mean, I've never seen it so blatant. I mean, it makes 2016 and 2020 even, look like a walk in the park.
Well, Gary, to the point that we were making earlier about whether or not this is a coup, I mean, in order for a coup to be effective, you have to have a compliant media in order for that to happen. And they're either compliant through state power controlling them, like there were in the communist regimes and socialist regimes around the country, or they're compliant just by not asking the questions. And that's what's going on here, is you have a compliant media with the coup that is not asking the questions, not demanding answers. The days of Woodward and Bernstein going in and doing an investigation and figuring out what's going on inside the White House are gone, and they're not coming back in the United States. And it really is a sad day for the First Amendment that the press is not exercising its right to be free and independent of government actors.
Yeah.
Well, they do if it was Trump. I mean, they do if it was a Republican. They just don't on the Democratic side. They can pretty much get away with anything they want. And I mean, the duplicity we've seen, too, with the State Department coming out and criticizing Venezuela because it looks like they have a fraudulent election. And then the Tanzania, where the president of the country jailed his opponent. And the State Department comes out and opposes that. Well, what's happening here?
Yeah.
What's happening here with them doing the same exact thing to Donald Trump? We may see that on September 18th with this so-called judge in New York, if he sentences him to jail. I mean, it's the duplicity and the blatancy, as you mentioned, Gary, on how they're handling this is just astonishing, really.
Yeah.
I want to ask, the problem is not everybody follows this and they think they can get away with it, and they might be able to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't think they had a shot, and I think they've got a pretty good shot. I want to get both of your opinions, a little crystal balling here. Start with you, Trey. Look, Merchan's cooperating. Okay, you don't need to agree to that. I'm saying it. Judge Merchan is cooperating with him, taking his marching orders from them because he's all ideological, same step and everything else. Come September 18th, have they figured out which is better, more politically advantageous vis-a-vis the campaign, to put Trump behind bars? And if they do, what would be, in your opinion, the political people going voting fallout from that decision? You first, Trey. Same question to you, Jim, when we come back.
Well, if they've learned their lessons from history, they'll take a lesson from Pontius Pilate and learn that if they put Donald Trump in jail, they will have created a martyr and really galvanized support for him. Not that there's not galvanized support behind him right now. First and foremost, I don't think that the 18th happens. I think that gets pushed off. I'm going to continue my renewal for calling on the Department of Justice to absolutely intervene in that case, protect the jurisdiction of my commission that I work on, to go in and protect federal campaign finance law and not allow the states to do what they're doing there in New York. I think it's a big overreach with regard to federalism that needs to be corrected, and this Justice Department needs to do something about it. They won't, but I'm going to continue to call for it as long as I'm in my position. I'm going to continue to call for that. But at the end of the day, they will make a martyr out of him if they put him in jail. And I think that they will kick the can down the road until after the election. They'll use the fact that the Trump team has asked for time and delays to happen, and they'll act like they're acquiescing to some requests from the Trump legal team in order to push it further down the road.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, Gary, I agree totally with Trey on that, because one thing that we're seeing in the polling, and we've never really seen this before, and I confirmed this with one of the Biden pollsters, and he agreed, Donald Trump does better with the non-voters than the Democrats do.
Right.
That's the first time we've ever seen that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at these polls, when they poll just adults versus registered voters and likely voters, it's almost always been in the past that the Democrats do better with the bigger pool. Not this year, not in this election. Trump does better. What's that tell you? So you got a lot of people out there that we saw in 2016, particularly in Pennsylvania, people that had never voted before, coming out of the woodwork in the rural areas to vote for Donald Trump. They're afraid of that. And Trey's right. If they actually try to put Trump in jail, those people may come back. And that's what they're afraid of. And I agree with Trey. I think they put this sentence off. Trump's giving them the avenue to do that. He's requested that the sentencing be delayed. And Marshawn can say, well, I'm not biased. I'm agreeing with Trump, and I'll rule after the election.
I think that's absolutely. I think they
and they'll stop that because they're afraid of what Trey said, that will really energize the base, not just the current Trump voters, but these people from the outer areas that never vote. And if they come out to vote and vote for Trump, that's where the Democrats are in trouble.
Well, Trey, does this tick off the Democratic base? We want him behind bars. What's wrong with you people? I mean, does it have a bit of a depressing effect on the Democratic base?
Well, you heard that last night. I mean, that's absolutely what they want. They want him in an orange jumpsuit, and they started screaming, "Lock him up!" last night,
right?
Which I find amazing, given that they were so highly offended at the "lock her up" chants that were done towards Hillary Clinton, and now turnabout's fair play. So, good on them for exercising their First Amendment rights to engage in that type of speech. And why they wanted it silenced on the right when it was happening then, I don't know, but. At the end of the day, that's absolutely what they want. But I think they understand that they have arrested the fall that came from the failed Biden campaign, whatever that may be. I mean, Jim's probably right. The polls weren't that bad, but they thought they were in a free fall. And I think they feel like they've arrested that fall. And now they don't want to do anything that's going to spark another free fall. Right. And so I think the powers that be are going to say, let's put off any type of sentencing until after the election and not let it. And they'll do it all under the guise of not influencing the election, which, by the way, is the same reason that the Department of Justice gives to the Federal Election Commission as to why they won't intervene in that case, because they don't want to affect the outcome of the election.
Right. Yeah, not at all.
Because it might help conservatives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because bringing all sorts of indictments and sending people, the third-ranking attorney, prosecutor from the DOJ into the New York to the Bronx DA office. And no, they don't want to influence anything, though. All right, guys, I'm going to ask for your final thoughts on all of this. Jim, let's start with you and your final thoughts.
Well, this is an interesting time. We've got this whole week of the Democratic National Convention. They expect to get a bump out of this. It'll be interesting to see if they do or not with the mixed messages they have. They kind of fumbled the first night, as we mentioned, with Biden being on so late, with the teleprompter problems. So we will just see. But I think to get back to a point that Trey made here in the final seconds we have, what we're seeing here and relating to putting Trump in jail or Kamala doing interviews, they think they've got this right now. And they don't want to upset the apple cart in any way. Therefore, that's why you don't see Kamala being out front doing interviews. It has to be scripted, has to be on the teleprompter. And that's why we're going to get through this week with a minimum, they hope, of controversy. Because if they keep things going the way they are, and this is why Trump's not going to go to jail right away, they'll put him in afterwards. But right away, because if we upset the apple cart, that's the only way we lose. And that's what they're afraid of right now.
Yeah, good insight. Trey, bring us home.
Well, Gary, I think the most important thing that we can do right now, especially for those that are watching Souls and Liberty here, is one, continue to support this effort, because we've got to have good media outlets that are pushing for answers to tough questions of all the candidates, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Kamala Harris, whether it be those who are running for the Senate and the House. We have got to have an independent media that is out there asking the tough questions, and those are not happening right now. And this is going to be one of the only places that these type of issues get investigated, where the questions get asked, and where answers may come in the future. So, that's the first and foremost thing that I think is important, is to continue to support efforts like this. Secondarily, I think that I don't think that there's a bump that comes from this convention. I think the bump that Kamala Harris was going to get from this convention, she already got. Because
I think so. I agree with you on that. I think that's already happened.
Right. I think that it's already happened. And again, I don't think that there's any way, to go back to Jim's analogy, I don't think that there's any way to keep all of the balls in the air without letting one or two fall, with all of the various messaging that they have to do in order to keep all of their coalitions together. And I think what you'll see is, I think they'll be off schedule tonight. I think, you're going to give Bill Clinton a microphone and you're going to think that he's not going to talk over his allotted amount of time. It's going to happen. The oogling that'll go over Barack Obama and Michelle Obama is going to take up more time. So at the end of the day, they're going to continue to be behind, because they have all of these various coalitions that they have to kowtow to.
Yeah, very good insights, gentlemen. Really good as always. And I want to underscore what you said, Trey. If you're sitting at home watching this on your phone and computer or whatever, and you like this, we like to think that we have the most intelligent discussions because of how we weave together all of these different themes. We're not saying individual things, at least most of the time, that other outfits aren't saying, but we bring them all together here. And what I honestly believe is the most intelligent, insightful way that can be done. So, gentlemen, as always, great insights. Thank you very much. We, of course, will have you back on frequently as the campaign moves along. Thank you. Before we leave you, there was a truly disgusting, revolting sight, actually, yesterday in Chicago. It was the presence of Cardinal Blaise Cupich on the stage, invoking God's blessings. This from a man who has gone out of his way to ignore God, even in his role as a cardinal archbishop. Remember back in 2018, when news about another cardinal, Theodore McCarrick, broke, that he had been sexually abusing dozens and dozens and dozens of seminarians and other vulnerable males, as well as children. Do you remember that, 2018? The news swept the nation and the world. Cupich's response, he was sitting on the local NBC station in Chicago, and his response on camera was, well, we aren't going to go down that rabbit hole. Pope Francis faces much more pressing concerns like climate change. Jesus had Judas. Always remember that and never forget that. However, that said, the picture of a cardinal on that stage asking God to bless an agenda of child murder and child exploitation deserves a special degree of revulsion and calling out. Cupich is the living, breathing icon of the irreligious left, taking words like justice, fairness, equality, rights, truth, and perverting their meaning like that party perverts the minds and bodies of children. Human beings recognize the importance and absolute value of all of those goods, fairness, equality, justice, all of it, truth. So Democrats keep the words, but they change the definitions so they can then go on to misapply them. Remember, this is the party that wants grown men to be able to legally have sex with little boys, using the term rights as classifying such adult monsters as victims of societal constraints. It's the same party that wants school officials to sneak behind parents' backs and give puberty-blocking drugs to their children. The same party that wants to legalize a child submitting to a knife and having his or her genitalia mutilated, again being trafficked under the word right and health care. Words have meanings, but when you change the meaning and keep the word, you're doing the devil's work. And that especially includes a cardinal standing on the stage helping masquerading the truth. Something Supage and his fellow communists should heed, that they won't until their clock on this earth has run out, is that in all the gospel accounts, there is only one single sin that the Son of God attached a specific punishment to: the abuse of children. He used the word scandal. He said that warrants that a man who participates in corrupting childhood innocence have a millstone be hung around his neck and plunged into the depths of the sea. The Son of God actually said what would await such a man would actually be worse than that fate. The Democratic Party hates children. They kill them, pervert them, mutilate them, indoctrinate them, rape them, and abuse them. They truly are the party of devils. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.